So, like I said, my name is Vedang, and I want to talk about developer workflows tooling for Clojure today. Um, and the secret reason behind this talk is so that you will show me your workflows afterwards. Please come and meet me, talk to me, tell me how I'm not doing things in the best way possible, and help me become better. Because I have seen everybody has a different workflow, and many people are far, far more productive than I am. So I would love to learn. Okay, let's get started. So let's start from the very beginning. I want to write a new library or application. The way to do that in Clojure world today is using deps.eden. So what are all the things that you need to figure out? Uh, I need to figure out how to run my application. I need to figure out how to run all the tests in my project. Now, this might seem like very basic stuff for people who come from other languages. I'm sometimes very jealous of other languages ecosystems because people take all this for granted. And the deps.eden workflow, or rather the set of tooling that the Clojure community has built, is very, very good, but it leaves all of this convention stuff to other people to figure out. So there's no obvious way of how I'm supposed to be doing this. How do I build artifacts for my library, right, or app? Again, tools.build is excellent, it provides everything, but there isn't like a single command that I can run to get this done. How do I deploy these artifacts so that other people can use them? So these are all real problems that you need to figure out for yourself. I need to figure out for myself. So I use deps new for this, and this is my first recommendation to you. It's a tool built by Sean Corfield. Here you can see how to install that tool and use it, how to use the tool actually. And this below is what it looks like. So if you can see, this is a new library that I created for this demo, and this is a basic structure of what it put out for me. So what did it give me? It gives me all the boilerplate that I need to get started with an application or with a library, right? If you look at the README that it generates, there are very clear instructions on how I should be running my tests, how I should be running the library itself, how it should be building it, things like that. All the aliases are there in the deps.eden file, and the commands are that you can see on the screen, they are all there in the README. So this is great. This gives me a standardized way of getting started with development. And if I jump into another project which also uses the same conventions, then it's really easy for me to get get productive in it. Deps.new has built-in templates, app, lib, and a few others. But you can write your own templates also for deps.new. And if you are a framework author, you absolutely should, I think, write deps.new templates. For example, I currently use Pedestal for routing, and the Pedestal guys have recently written a deps.new template, and that showed me so many things about Pedestal that I was missing. Like I started with that, and I could learn so much by reading the code that the template produced. So what can we do as Clojure devs? I'm sure all of you have your own favorite framework. Does it have a deps.new template? If not, please think about adding one. That's a great way in which you can contribute back. Okay. I've added some references slides. I'll just skip through them because it's a long talk, but I'm going to publish this presentation so you guys can refer to that afterwards. So I have a bare bones library or application, but I need to add more aliases for my own personal requirement. So my way of working is that I set up a REPL in a terminal and I connect to it from inside my editor. I don't do this auto magic starting that other people do. So I need aliases to connect to a REPL. I need aliases to set up logging. Logging is hard. I figured it out once in my life. I never want to figure it out again. So I want to automate all of this. For this, I use Neil. Neil is a project by Amogh. It's a very small project compared to all the other amazing things that he has done. But it's very, very useful, and I recommend it to everyone. It can add aliases for you. So this is an example of me adding my cider alias. So I just say Neil add cider, and it adds this to the project at the right place, right? So you can see these versions are not hard-coded in the template. Neil fetches the latest stable version every time I use this. So it's quite handy. I don't have to figure this thing out again. And from that fetches the latest stable version, you should have gotten a clue that it can do more than just add aliases. It's not, you can search for your dependencies, right? So you can say, I want to use next.jdbc, which is a very popular library for SQL work. but I don't remember the artifact, the name of the artifact, right? So I just do a nil dep search. It gives me the result of everything that has that next.jdbc in its name. I know that this is the library that I want, com.github.sean Corfield. So I can just take that and I can then add it to my project, saying nil dep add, right? And now it's there. If I didn't want it in the main deps.eden map, I can add it under an alias like cider, and then it'll do that as well. So this is really useful. What can Clojure devs do to make nil better? So adding aliases to nil right now is not easy. The code base is really small, and actually it's not very difficult, but you still have to read the code and do it. I would like somebody in the community to take this up and make it easier to add aliases to nil, please. I'll be very grateful for it. References for nil. Okay, moving on. So now I have like a bare bones project, and I have the aliases that I want. I'm going to start that project. We have seen the test alias, it was added by depsnew. We have seen cider, we just added it. This logsdev is a new alias, and I've put it in here purposefully because I want to show you the next bit. So again, I use nil to add my logging alias, which adds this particular thing out below that you can see. Here I want you to pay attention to this local root thing, right? So what deps.eden provides are two new ways of using libraries apart from Maven. One is local root and another is directly from Git, from some Git URL, SHA and tag. These things can be done in LineEngine also, I know, but it's native to deps.eden and it's like really grown on me as a way of working. It's quite powerful. So what this means is that there is a folder called logger, which should be treated as a library or a application, whatever, as a library in this particular case, and load that and make the code available for that. It will have its own deps.eden and stuff like that. And these are the JVM options for logging that I have figured out and that I want. So again, like I said, I think getting logging right is quite complicated. I did it once, and I wrote a depsnew template for it. So now I can fetch that. Again, I want you to pay attention to this thing, git SHA here. So it's basically cloning it from my GitHub, and it's creating that folder called logger. And this is what that folder looks like. So this is the structure of that folder that is generated. The hard part here is figuring out that log4j2 configuration for development and production and getting the right interface that I want to use in all my projects for logging, which this has done for me. Since we are on the topic of logging, I want to add just one more bit of information before we move on, which is that I use structured logging everywhere, and I recommend that everybody should use structured logging. When I say structured logging, I mean I emit an event, which is a JSON map, essentially. So the logging library that I use is Pedestal, and of all the logging libraries that I've used, this one is my favorite. If you guys don't like it for any reason, please come up to me and let me know why. I like it a lot. This is what logging with Pedestal looks like. So there are key value pairs that I'm basically passing to the log function, which are getting pushed out. This is the example of the log line, right? I have prettified it, of course, but this is what is printed out to the REPL, to the console. Why print JSON events? Because all the current observability tools work on events. And if your application is pushing out JSON events, it becomes really easy to wire it up to an observability platform. You don't have to like have something in the middle for doing the transformation of your logging into these events, like vector, for example. Okay. Okay. So I have a code base. I have started the REPL against it. I am writing code against it. The next problem is that documentation, right? So my documentation is a mess, is a little bit harsh, I think, but I would like documentation to be beautiful to see. I would like documentation to be easy to share with people. And I would like documentation essentially to be like Jupyter notebooks, right? We are a REPL first language. We work in Clojure. So our day-to-day job is like writing a bit of code, seeing the output, writing the next bit of code, seeing the output, which is essentially what Jupyter is. So where are my notebooks? So the next bit of tooling that I want to share is I use something called Clerk, which is built by Next Journal. which gives me these beautiful notebooks and beautiful code bases that I want. The comments are written in Markdown in your code, and then they get exported into beautiful HTML. So this is basically what a clerk notebook would look like. So this is some code that I had written about like some group stuff that I wanted to create a page for. So there is a lot of like comments. In the middle there's a little bit of code, there are more comments. And this is basically what it looks like, right? So it's quite pretty. And here are some other examples. This is the documentation of clerk itself. So this is clerk, what is called the clerk book. This is what it looks like, right? So you can write the code and you can have it generate beautiful images like this. It's very straightforward. You saw that we actually added clerk using Neil in one of the slides before, if you were paying attention to the slides. So that's all, you just need to add the dependency. This is a project called Recipe, which is a model checker in Clojure. And this is an example of how to use Recipe, this code that you're looking at on the screen. And where is my mouse? Okay. And this is what it looks like as an HTML page. So it's quite pretty, again, all clerk. And then you can have this kind of imaging in your documentation. So somebody was talking to me before the talk about like how you can have pretty onboarding documentation, and I feel that clerk is something that you can explore. Okay. All right. One thing which I really do not like about, like, so this is great for notebooks, but I don't want my code to be like this. I don't want my code to have like giant blocks of comments in the middle of the code. It makes the code unreadable. And when I am reading code, I want to be in the flow of reading code and understanding what I'm doing. So what I do is I mix clerk with a tool called tagref, which you should see and check out. It's quite wonderful. So what tagref does, here is an example of how you would write some very simple functionality with tagref, right? So you add a tag wherever you want to add something important, like this. And then whenever you're using something where you want to like remember that particular thing, you add a ref. That's it, right? So it's very simple, very straightforward. What the tool provides for you is that it just checks that every tag, every ref has a valid tag against it. That's all the checking that it does. So you can hook it up in your CI, and you will know that there are no spelling mistakes or there are no inadvertent code deletions, right? So now what I do is I take all of that beautiful documentation that I wrote with clerk and I put it at the bottom of the file. And then I just add tags in all the appropriate places of the documentation, and I refer to those tags from everywhere else in my code base. So my code is easy to read, it's clean, and the documentation is still there, which produces documents like this, which, oops, again, where's the mouse? Documents like this, which are quite easy, quite pleasant to read. Okay. All right. So I don't know if I'm moving fast or not actually. How much time do I have, guys? Great, cool, then I'm moving fast, that's good. All right, so my code is a mess. What's the right way to write code? This is where we come to like the linters and the formatting part of things. Everybody has an opinion on what's the right way to write the code, and that's good, you should have an opinion, but it's better if it's easy to read the code if you can open up some unknown code and just get into it, right? So these are very popular in the Clojure community. I am pretty sure that most of the people here who have any experience with working with Clojure are already aware of them. CLJ Condo and CLJ format are specifically quite popular. You might or might not have heard of the third one, which is Zprint. Zprint is very, very aggressive for formatting as compared to CLJ format. But if you are willing to forego your own biases, you might want to try Zprint as well. I use CLJ Condo and CLJ format mainly, but Zprint for anything that I'm going to put out. So I have a few recommendations for these tools. For CLJ Condo, my main recommendation is that please export the CLJ Condo config of the libraries that you're using. CLJ Condo provides a way to do this, which I have shown out here. And essentially, if you run this particular command, you are going to get all the configuration that library authors have written that you are using into your own project, so that whenever you're using their macros, they are linted properly and your editor can tell you if you have made a mistake or not. If you're using a language server protocol like Clojure LSP, Clojure LSP does this automatically for you. So whenever you start Clojure LSP, this export happens, and then you can look at your .clj condo, and in this case, for example, brand new library, I still have a bunch of things that I've added to it, so I can see the configuration that has been exported. So this configuration has been written by the library authors, and it's very, very helpful. When I'm using the functions from it, it will help me. Okay. My second recommendation about CLJ condo is to please commit your CLJ condo folder into Git. For some reason, I see that people add CLJ condo to git ignore. I don't think they mean to add the whole folder. I think they just mean to add the CLJ condo cache to the git ignore, but this still happens, and this is unnecessary. I feel that CLJ condo configuration should be available to everyone as part of your code base, and it's very valuable to have this. So please commit this if you're not committing it. Okay, CLJ format. So CLJ format, my recommendation is for Emacs people, which I am. Sorry, I don't know how other editors do this. I'm sure they have something similar as well. There is a tool in Emacs called Aphelia. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. It's essentially a generic tool for formatting any buffer. So it has hooks for multiple different kinds of programming languages, and it runs the appropriate code formatter at the right time with minimal disturbance to your typing experience. So my CLJ format is run via Aphelia, and I recommend you set up Aphelia if you are using Emacs. So what can we do as Clojure developers, right? Please write CLJ condo configuration for your favorite libraries. Not all of them have it. If you're using a library where you're not sure whether it has it or not, look at the code base, see if there is a .clj condo file, see if your favorite macro is there, and please add this configuration. It's not very difficult to do most of the times. So most of the times adding CLJ condo configuration is very straightforward. Once in a while you'll have some really horrible macro which is very difficult to write a linting configuration for. But please contribute this back. It'll be great. References. Okay. So can we improve the REPL experience? So we are in the REPL all the time, right? What are we doing to make the best use of it? If we can even improve the REPL experience by like 1%, I feel like we'll be far more productive Clojure programmers. So I want to share the thing that has changed my life inside the REPL in the last year, which is a project called Flowstorm. If you have not used it, you should immediately, like if there's one thing you're going to take away from this talk, take away Flowstorm. This is me adding Flowstorm here. Essentially what Flowstorm is that the team, which I think is only one person, JP Monates or something like that, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. He has rewritten an entire compiler with all the instrumentation put in. So what you do is you put this in your develop alias, and you just disable the official compiler and use the Clojurestorm compiler instead. So the Clojurestorm compiler does full instrumentation of the entire code and captures everything, right? So what happens is that in your development mode, now I have asked it, for example, in this config, you can see here, I have asked it to instrument only those namespaces which start with me.vedang, right? When you have this kind of instrumentation, what can you do? Let's see if we can see a simple example of this. Okay, this example comes from the Flowstorm README itself, but I have used Flowstorm in very complex debugging cases and it just works. So, okay. So let's see what happens when we do. This is going to fail, okay? And this has failed because there is somewhere a null in the middle, and I don't know how that null has gotten there. And it's not trivially easy to look at this code and debug it in your head to say where exactly the null has gotten in, right? But what you could do is you could just start the debugger, and this works because of the that alias that I have started with. Can you see that? Is that it might not be completely legible to people at the back. I'll try and make it a little bit bigger, but I don't know if that helped. All right. So I had cleared the capture stuff before I started this, so there's only a single thing in here. But generally what you do is that if you have an error, you just clear whatever is in there and start again. Here I can just search for what I was looking for. So there's one invocation of foo that it has captured. And this is what it looks like. And in this invocation, I can see everything, right? So I can see that n passed was 70. I filtered odd. At the end of that filtering, this was the result, if you can see on the side pane. Then I partitioned it, mapped the second one, and here you can see, let's just go ahead where I drop it. You can see the nil in there, right? So the problem was here in the partitioning, you can see that these are partitions of 2, except for the last one, which has only a single element in it. And I'm doing a second in there. So now I know where the problem is. So I can do this forward stepping, backward stepping into my code to see exactly what has run across multiple threads. So right now there was only a single thread here. But let's see if there's, what we can do is we can just go back to that. Okay, actually let's not. Can we do this? Okay. Did it write that? It wrote something. Let's see. Okay, so it captured the log for me. It's captured 3 instances of the logging. And here I can go down and see what exactly happened. So I can see that this is the thing that was captured in this particular instance. And I can keep going ahead and seeing what is being printed out in that code. So that's pretty cool. After I discovered this, I have never had much problem debugging anything, because essentially I have that entire thing captured and I can go through it anytime I want. Okay. So yeah, this is Flowstorm. You should see this talk. It has the full walkthrough of Flowstorm, and it does far more things than I just showed. So I showed just the most important thing that Flowstorm does, but it has like a huge amount of functionality built into it. Okay. Next part that I wanted to talk about was about, again, new tooling that has come around conventions. So I was like, the question is why does anybody go with microservices, right? So now we know clearly that the answer is that we want clear ownership. We want smaller teams to be working on bits and pieces of the code. And microservices is like a gut reaction for that, right? So you have a giant monolith, and you take that and nobody knows where which part is being used and who has, there are no clear boundaries about who owns what. So microservices kind of help with that. So what are the benefits that we get from moving to microservices, right? So microservices are easier to test because there are smaller amount of code that you have to test. There are clear contracts, so you're communicating with one microservice via another microservice, then there's an API that you're essentially using. And there are independent deployments to your microservices, right? So these are great benefits to have. There are lots of problems, I know that, but this is the reason why people would want to go for microservices. Okay. What about monorepos? Have you guys heard of or used monorepos? So monorepos are where all the code sits in like one giant repository. A huge advantage of doing something like this is that there is no versioning hell, or I would say there's less versioning hell than there is for microservices. Anybody who has worked with lots of microservices and who has worked in like an architecture or a platform team knows how difficult it is if you have to like upgrade dependencies across multiple services. This problem is far easier to do in monorepos. Refactoring across multiple services. If you have multiple services which are using the same kind of code, it's so much easier if they are all there in the same repository, and you can just refactor them. You can do a search. You can. It's a far easier thing than doing across microservices. Collaboration and onboarding. If there's somebody new, that person has to clone one thing. The documentation is in one place. It's all readable, more readable than microservices probably. So in theory, this is also some benefit that monorepos gives you. Okay, but I have worked with monorepos where everything has gone wrong. Right. So why? What are the problems? Contracts are unwritten. How do you use code from different directories? There's no clear answer to that, right? People just use whatever they want to use. There's no enforcement of it. Testing is generally messy. you see this as the test suite time starts to grow and becomes very problematic because everything is running at once. Refactoring, collaboration, onboarding all becomes problematic because of these above two problems, because there are no clear rules about like which code should be used where and which should not be used. So this is Polylith, and this is what I have been using for the past year for new projects which are bigger projects, and I recommend it highly to everyone here. Please try it out. It is basically a set of conventions for how you should lay your code on the disk, and tooling for ensuring that the code works the way that you want it to work. So this is an example of a Polylith directory which I have created for this particular talk. This is like with nothing else in it. This is what it looks like, right? So they have vague and like, I'm not fully happy with the terminology that they use, but this is their terminology. So they create these top level folders, bases, components, projects, and development. We'll try and quickly understand what they do. So the project is basically the interface with the hosting platform that Polylith provides, right? So think about any of the configuration that you have to write for the artifacts that you're creating, your fly.toml configuration or your Docker file or things like that. All of that sits in this projects folder. If we are taking an example, let's say that I want to rewrite the code for my own blog, and I currently have a static blog. I want that, but I also want a dynamic blog because I want to do some sort of user logging stuff on it, right? So I'll have two projects, the static and the dynamic one. The static project essentially is nothing other than the public folder of what I want to serve, right? And I'm probably going to deploy it to GitHub pages or some other thing like that. The dynamic is the Uber jar, the Docker file, things like that, right? The server essentially. So that's what projects is. Bases. Bases is the interface with the external world. So if you're going to write a CLI, if you're going to write a Lambda function, if you're going to write routes for your server, all of those things go in your bases. So we'll continue with our example of the static site. If you have a static site, essentially you don't need a base because you use what is provided by your hosting platform to serve the HTML. But for your development purposes, you might want to write a small HTML server which just serves from your public folder, right? And similarly for the dynamic site, you might want to serve, you will have your routes which you will be serving from your server. That will go in this folder. And finally, you have components. Components are your modules of business logic basically, and they provide an interface for the external world to use, right? External world meaning other bases or other components. So in our example, I might have three components. One is content, which is all the markdown files that I want to serve. So all of them go inside content. Another is render, where I am writing code to convert the markdown files to HTML. All of that goes inside render. And a third is readers, where I am writing code for logging in users and visitors on my website and stuff like that, right? So there are my three components. How does all of this tie together? So my static is essentially one base, which is the static server, plus two components, content and render. And my dynamic is one base, which is the dynamic server, and three components, content, render, and readers, right? So this is how I'm going to reuse the content and the render, and this is essentially how I have that separation. So what Polylith enforces is that you have to define an interface, and that interface, the functions that are defined in that interface are the only ones which can be used by components outside of that particular folder, right? And the tool enforces this. So then I have answers for my questions. Where does my Docker file go? It goes into this projects folder. Where do I put my end-to-end tests for testing the entire project? It goes in projects web dynamic test. Where do I define routes? It goes in the base. Where do I write the functions to render the HTML? It goes in components render interface, just the functions. The actual functionality will be implemented somewhere behind. What do I have to write contract tests for? Anything that's in the interface file, I have to write contract tests for it, right? What functions do I need to document thoroughly? Anything that's in the interface file, I need to document. Where do I add my observability stuff? Anything that's in the interface, I have to add metrics for it, logging for it, traces for it. I don't really need maybe all of that for the functions which are hidden. Where does all the actual functionality live? It lives inside, which is hidden, right? So the render has post, tags, index, whatever. And all of these have certain functions which are in the interface. So what does this tool give me, the poly tool? It enables that I can run the right tests. So it's not running the whole thing, it's running some tests only. It's not running all the tests. It checks that all of this interface loading is used properly, and it upgrades libraries across all of my bricks. So it's solving the problems that I was having with monorepos, allowing me to keep one monorepo, get the benefits of it, and move on. References for understanding polylith. Okay. There is much more that I wanted to talk about, but I am running short on time essentially, or maybe I don't know if I'm running short on time or not. I thought that I would run short of time, so I stopped. But I'll just give you the hints if you want to look more into it. If you want to do CI/CD, Babashka is great, and please use it as a replacement for your make, just, or whatever that you're using right now. For observability, my preference is Pedestal, but Iapetos and CLJ Hotel both are quite good, and I've used them both. In web development, I really want to recommend Martian. So Martian is essentially reading your swagger.json file, OpenAI JSON file, and it's creating that entire API spec out for you, which is very cool. I think it's like inspired from maybe Python stuff like Fast, which does similar stuff. I don't know. I've never used the Python side stuff, so I don't know. But I found that it makes it really easy for me to like just easily consume other people's API and test with it and play around with it. Yeah, that's what I have. I want to talk about a bunch of this stuff. I can discuss it in person if you have any doubts, or if you want to tell me other things that I don't know about. I would love to improve my own workflow, so please come say hi. And yeah, that's me. Thank you. Questions? Yes. So, no. So his question was why leave the debugger inside Emacs, which is provided by Cider and CLG Refactor, and go outside. The example that I showed was very trivial, and CLG Refactor will work just fine on that particular example, no problem. But just knowing that everything is recorded, I don't really have to rerun anything, is a huge thing. So when I'm working, whenever I have a problem, I just open up Flowstorm and search and just solve the problem. I don't have to do anything. The fact that it's recording everything is a very big deal for me. It saves a lot of time. Anything, anyone? Yeah.
I don't know if this is correct, but I think part of developer productivity is to write code that runs faster.
Yes.
Do you have any suggestions for that?
No.
For Clojure?
No. Clojure is, so there is I have a concrete suggestion. There is a blog called Clojure Goes Fast, which is very, very good. And they cover a lot of these benchmarking and even writing code styles. So they have a very good blog post about how you should write certain kinds of loops and how you can benchmark them. Criterium is the go-to benchmarking tool inside Clojure, but there are some others also, especially developed by the same team that writes Clojure Goes Fast, which are very, very good. But I mean, Clojure is not fast. So
What are your thoughts on Clojure LSP? Do you use it? I guess not that.
I don't use it. It's very convenient if you don't want to start a REPL. But I already have a REPL running most of the times. So I don't see the point of it. I have it configured. I can get it started and running quickly. And I do use it if it's like, if I'm looking at a library code, for example, I use it. It helps me jump around and helps me with the documentation completion and stuff like that. But if I have a REPL running, I mean, there's nothing new that it adds which the REPL doesn't already provide. So.
Is your Emacs config completely?
Yes, but it's completely outdated, and I mean, in the sense that I use an outdated packaging tool called LGet, which was popular briefly 10 years ago. And everybody today uses use package, but I don't want to go through the effort of reconfiguring my Emacs. I like it the way it is. Anyone else? Any other questions? Yeah.
What's the setup for code completion? Do you use Cider
I use Cider. Yes. Sometimes Cider is slow. Sometimes. So if you start running into that, you might want to try the LSP server. What I have found is that I haven't debugged it because honestly I'm not very keen on the LSP server anyways. Sometimes the LSP server makes my entire editor freeze. Now it might be an implementation problem with eglot, or it might be a problem with Clojure LSP. I don't know. But where I will start the LSP is when I want to do renaming. So if I want to do renaming of symbols, CLJ refactor is very slow, and eglot is just, Clojure LSP is just rapid. So I do that. Huh? The tool, so there's a tool called Poly. I had a bunch of slides actually, I commented them out, which does all of this checking for you. So if you do Poly check, it will check that all these conventions are enforced. So the conventions are good and you can follow the conventions even if you don't have the tool, but the tool is actually what makes it powerful. You can put it in your CI/CD, you can check it locally, you can run tests, so the most important thing that I use the tool for is it runs the right subset of tests. Doesn't run everything. So it looks at the change and says that I only need to run these 5% of the tests. Don't need to run everything to test the entire thing out, which is quite powerful.
Is there anything in Polyglot that's specific to Clojure? I understand that the library.
The tool is specific to Clojure. The conventions are not. So we use the conventions. There is, by the way, this tool is also, somebody is maintaining it for Python also, and there is somebody writing it for JavaScript. I'm looking forward to those happening all. But we follow that. We follow those. Oops, that's my Emacs saying I'm not paying attention to it. Sorry. It's a built-in thing into Emacs called zone. Okay, any other questions? Does anyone still use Lanningen? Yes. Lanningen is quite good, guys. But deps.eden, it's just easier. All the new projects are using deps.eden, and it's very, very easy. And the local root idea of deps.eden is quite powerful. So I would recommend that you look at it as well. But it's very complex, yeah, I agree. It's not at all easy. Anything else? Any other questions, guys?
Do you have that logger repo has something which is publicly available?
Yeah, yes, it's publicly available.
What's the most complex thing in logging?
So I want logging to be asynchronous, and I want it to be fast. I want it to be structured. I wanted to go to the console in production and to a file in development and things like that. So, I did it once. It's fine. I don't want to write the same configuration files again, and I don't want to write the same exclusions again. So I want Postgres jar to log at warning level and above, not below. These things can all go inside my template. So. Any other questions? Yeah.
You are using tag ref, right? So, do you use that to document the whole project, or how? Do you use it like a README file, or for what is the purpose of tag ref actually?
All over the code, you can put tag ref. So let me see if I can show you. I think I can show this to you without worrying about open source. So in my project that I'm writing right now, there are 19 tags, 25 references to it, right? So if I wanted to, actually I can't show you, it's powerful to show the code itself, but let me see what I can show you here, right? Let's just do. So these are all the tags that are in there, right? So I want to know what are the rules to do something. I want to know what is an important thing about. So I've created these tags, and now I'm using them wherever in the code. I'm referring to them that here, this code is written like this because of these things, right? Now what happens is that when I do search on this, right, it shows me everywhere where it is used. So it, sorry, this is in vterm, but if it were in the actual code base, it would show me everything that it is, everywhere that this was being used, right? So if I was reading a bit of code and I wanted to know why exactly this code is written in this particular way, there is a ref there and I just have to search and that will show me where the tag is. I can go read that, I can go see where else all of these conditions have been used. So it's a very simple convention, it's a very small and tiny thing, and it's purely driven on search. There's nothing else. But it just makes your life easy.
Yeah, we too face this situation, like we will modify the code and we'll not know why we're doing that. It's really, really useful. And the other point here is you are using for logging, right? Have you tried MuLog?
I have, I don't like it.
Okay. We use it for Zipkin traces actually. So we feel it useful because of it gives us how much time it takes to execute that and all the we have microservices, right? So how it travels into that, where are all it goes. So we use it for that. But yeah.
No, I mean, events are a brilliant idea. Whichever logging you are using should be producing events like MuLog is producing. I just think MuLog is a little bit complicated, especially like the code I found was difficult for me to deal with. I use pedestal log, which I think it's a single file, the code. It's very, very readable and just works. So
That's it. Thank you.
Any other questions, anyone? Okay. Thank you, guys.